It's a great privilege to be talking again with Larry Johnson, the former CIA analyst from Sonar 21. Larry Johnson, thank you for joining the Trends Journal.
I'm here, the notorious has-been.
I wanted to get your opinion. I couldn't have a better guest on right now. We have a lot of developments as far as the nuclear testing.
Mm-hmm.
Trump spoke about that. The head of the nuclear department in the U.S. came out over the weekend and said there will be no real nuclear bomb tests. It'll just be the systems involved.
Mm-hmm.
And the kind of, Trump indicated that it was going to be nuclear. So you have also now Russia responding today. Medvedev came out and he said, Russia has to take this seriously. And so did now Vladimir Putin. He said Russia needs to take Trump's comments very seriously. Larry, what is Trump thinking by announcing these tests? And is this a serious escalation, or is this just a little more gamesmanship here?
Yeah, that word you used, thinking. What? I don't believe Trump's acquainted with that word. It's something he needs to learn. This is a classic example of a narcissist who is threatened and reacts emotionally. Remember during the first Trump campaign back in 2015, 2016, little Marco. And Marco made a crack about Donald Trump's hands being tiny, which implied his manhood was tiny. Trump, oh no, look at the big hands. That's exactly what this is. So I was fortunate to be in Moscow recently for 12 days, meeting with the International Unity Club. It really is a nonpartisan organization. And when I say nonpartisan in Russia, I mean it reaches across the political spectrum. I interviewed Gennady Zyuganov, who's the head of the Communist Party. The Communist Party is still the second largest political party in Russia. And I met with 2 or 3 members of Putin's own political party and a couple of members of other political parties. But they're all in this International Unity Club because they say, look, we want to open a dialogue with the West. We want to talk, not fight. But in the course of that talking to these different people, the one common theme was, if Trump is serious about sending Tomahawks, that is going to seriously change the relationship between Russia and the United States. The goodwill, the desire to get along with the U.S. will be dissipated. And because Russia has to assume that those Tomahawks are carrying a nuclear warhead. Now, I understand that Putin had a conversation with Trump sometime over the last 7 to 10 days. Prior to that period, Trump was talking about, I could send a Tomahawk. He was leaving it open. Since the announcement of the Berezhnik cruise missile, this is a cruise missile is fueled by a miniature nuclear reactor. So it's atomically powered. U.S. so far doesn't have anything comparable to that. In the aftermath of that, Trump, when asked about the Tomahawk, said, no, I'm not sending it. I wouldn't be surprised that President Putin had a talk with Donald Trump, a respectful talk, but made him understand very clearly that any introduction of the Tomahawk missile into the system would mean that Russia would be in a position to potentially respond militarily against the United States, in the continental United States, against Washington, D.C. If Moscow is hit, D.C. would be hit. So it's interesting that after that conversation, Trump came out and said, no Tomahawks. So that, that's the good news. This talk about, we're going to test nukes. Well, you got to say, what do you mean? Are you talking about testing delivery vehicles? Are you talking about testing warheads? What is it that you're going to test? Are you going to actually blow up a warhead, do an underground test? Because we're not doing any more of those above ground. Well, my understanding, that's going to take 3 years to pull that off. Now, they have a variety of techniques for testing doing systems tests on weapons to make sure that they would detonate if ordered to. You don't need to set off an explosion. You don't need to go underground. But if we start doing that, that's sending a message to Russia that we're thinking about doing it, which is why Putin has now announced, hey, we're doing the systems checks. We're going to test to show that we are ready to go. What's so fascinating now about the Burevestnik missile is it's powered by a nuclear reactor. So we don't know how long it can stay up. I've heard some people say, a day, 2 days, a week, 6 months. Yeah, nobody knows. Maybe CIA has been able to access some technical data and has a good, solid prediction, but it's classified, and I'm not privy to it. What I do know, though, is this kind of weapon system now completely changes the whole realm of arms control talks. Because in the past, we'd sort it out. We'd do arms control talk for intercontinental ballistic missiles that could travel more than 5,000 miles. And then we had the intermediate range ballistic and nuclear missiles. Those could travel up to 2,000 miles. Well, this thing can do both. And in fact, it's the kind of thing you can, theoretically, you can equip it with a nuclear warhead, launch it, and, could it stay up for 6 months? Could it stay up for a year? Could it loiter? You could have it loitering in a particular area, but it maneuvers randomly.
And then they also have the Poseidon submarine.
Right.
And so I know last week they had two significant, or maybe the Brezhnev missile was the week prior, but
no, they came like back
about
to
the
back.
same.
Yeah, back to back.
And this one they said could take out the entire United Kingdom or something. At least that's what Russia says. Like, this thing is like a game changer. Also, this submarine launched.
It can be launched in the ocean, just like the Burevestnik. It's got a nuclear reactor on board, so you don't have to worry about the fuel, and you don't have to worry about time. Now, some of the Western reports have emphasized it could be used to create a tidal wave that would swamp, London, New York, Miami. But I don't think that's tactically how the Russians would use it. I think it's designed more to be used against a carrier task force group. It would wipe out the carrier and the destroyers and the cruisers and any other ships attached to a task force group. That's how it would be used. This can be used against military targets, not against civilian targets.
Is Russia wrong, Larry? Is Russia wrong thinking that Ukraine will negotiate to end the war? Does Russia need to win on the battlefield? Are they waiting for this kind of diplomatic resolution to a war that will never come? What do you feel? Are they going too slow? Because I heard someone mention earlier this week that Russia's miscalculating at this point, that the West is not going to negotiate and they need to win on the battlefield, and they should do it fast because it's being perceived as weakness by the West, that they're not winning war. What's your take on that position?
If you look at Mike Tyson now, and you say, he's a weak old man, I can take him. Good luck with that. I'd be willing to bet you're going to come back with a flat nose and a swollen eye and maybe a cauliflower ear. So this is just more silliness out of the West. The Russians would like to negotiate with the West, but the terms that they're going to negotiate on have been laid out very clearly by Vladimir Putin multiple times since June 14th of 2024. And the essential elements of that is that the 5 new republics of Russia, Crimea, Zaporizhia, Kherson, Luhansk, Donetsk, those are permanently part of Russia, the Russia Federation. There's no territory there that's going to be given back. There's nothing that Putin can offer to say, I'll give you half of it back. No, all of that is Russian. Ukraine and the West must recognize that as Russian. That's non-negotiable. That Ukrainian troops need to become pulled out of there voluntarily, or Russia will kill or capture them until they are fully expunged from those territories. and that NATO ends all relationships with Ukraine. No more, nothing, no more exercises, no more military cooperation. That's been Putin's position. That's non-negotiable. There's not room in there where they can give a little bit. CIA, we learned recently, had been arguing, oh, yeah, Russia will make some concessions on that. And we're told that the State Department Bureau of Intelligence and Research said, oh, hell no, they're not going to relent on that. So there was a difference of opinion. And that was publicized in March of this year as a dissent, where the presidential daily brief said, oh, this is what most of the intelligence community believes, but according to the State Department INR, they think the rest of us are full of crap. They said it in more diplomatic terms, but that was the essence of it. Well, state INR was correct. So the Russian attitude right now is, yes, we'd like to have the terms we've laid out accepted, and then we could proceed from there. But we don't think that's going to happen. So the war will continue. We're going to take the Dnipropetrovsk, Kharkiv, Sumy, Poltava, Kiev, and Odessa. Those are going to be captured militarily. Whether it happens this year or happens next year or even happens the year after, Russia's going to take those. And once they occupy those territories, they will then conduct an election. Give the people a chance to say, hey, we want to go with Russia or we want to go with Ukraine. One or the other. Vote, do it. And whatever the people decide, Russia will respect that. And they will say, okay, you want to stay with Ukraine? Be our guest. But you're not going to have a military unit here. Or we will, we'll take control of it. So that's where it stands. The West foolishly believes that it can fight Russia to a standstill. And I did a piece 2 days ago pointing out that when it comes to building modern battle tanks, Russia in 2024 built 60 to 80. All of NATO built 0, none. The only one that was described, if you do the AI search on it, is that Poland got 56, and that's because South Korea built the tanks for them. But they're still shy of what Russia's building. And then we haven't even talked about refurbished tanks. Take old tanks, upgrade them, put new counter drone technology on them, give them new barrels, etc. Right now, it takes the United States 2 years to upgrade just one M1 Abrams tank. Russia is upgrading these tanks at a rate of 1 every 3 months. Okay, so they got an advantage there. With respect to artillery shells, Russia is outproducing the West 3 to 1 or 4 to 1, depending upon the source. That's not going to change. With drones, Russia has a 2 to 1 to 3 to 1 advantage. Hypersonic missiles, Russia has them, NATO doesn't. So, it's just, you go point after point after point after point. There is no area in terms of weapons production or deployment that the West, NATO, all of NATO, and Ukraine included as a de facto member, have any advantage over Russia. None.
So why is Russia taking its time? Is it holding out hope that the West will come to its senses?
No.
So what's the point of Russia not completely just thrashing Ukraine?
Minimizing casualties, number one. And remember, the Ukrainians are Slavs. The Russians view the Ukrainians as relatives. So they're not really keen on killing the relatives as quickly as possible. Yeah, they could do it, but this is not about taking land. And, everybody keeps thinking of this as if it's like, a World Cup final match, in the soccer or the Super Bowl. It's the fourth quarter. There are 2 minutes left to go. Ukraine is down 14 points. Can Russia hold on?
That's a good point. That's how it is perceived.
Yeah, that's how it's being presented. And it's, this is more like a cricket match, okay? Those things go on for days.
But Larry, I want to hear your opinion on this. What administration did a better job, in your opinion, in dealing with, who do you think Russia would rather deal with? The Biden administration that didn't want to talk, or the Trump administration that talks, but says one thing, and then 2 days later does another? What do you think is a better administration as far as that goes?
No, there's no doubt about that. I heard this from several. I met with the number 2 guy in their legislature, a fellow named Babakov. I don't want to insult him by calling him the Chuck Schumer of Russia, but occupies sort of the similar position as Chuck Schumer, but he's in the majority party. They all would prefer to deal with Donald Trump. They think Donald Trump is more pragmatic, but they also recognize that he's not free to make decisions, and he is operating under a number of constraints. But they're pragmatic about it, I think. But you've seen now, though, with the recent statement that you pointed out with at the outset, with respect to recent statements by Putin and toughening position with Medvedev. I mean, Medvedev's always tough, but Putin has always tried to leave the door open. But the fact that they're now both speaking almost in the same voice, Trump's worn out his welcome. So it's going to be more trust but verify. It's one thing to talk; it's another thing to do. Show us by your actions what you intend.
Who's the adult in the room when Trump talks about Ukraine? Because I've seen various interviews saying that it's Marco Rubio, Keith Kellogg. I mean, Trump, when he announced the nuclear tests, he said the U.S. has more nuclear weapons than any country on earth, and it has more deadly arsenal. And that's factually incorrect. Russia has more nuclear weapons.
More warheads.
Warheads. So who's feeding Trump this information? And is Trump's ignorance on the matter? Is that a real? Is that developing into a real problem?
Well, it's not entirely Donald Trump's fault, because, as I referenced earlier, what the intelligence community was telling him as a majority was, Russia will give in. They'll make some sacrifices. They don't really mean it. This is their territory. That's just a negotiating position. So Trump said, "Oh, okay, that's what the intelligence community is telling me." And I've seen this before when he read what the State Department INR, Bureau of Intelligence and Research said. He got mad at the Bureau of Intelligence and Research. How dare you give me this kind of information? And reportedly, some of those analysts were fired. So the word gets around. Don't tell the president the truth, because you might get fired. Tell him what he wants to hear. So that's what's going on.
So Larry Johnson, former CIA analyst and from Sonar 21, he has an article up on Sonar 21 right now. Everyone should check out about Dick Cheney's legacy. Dick Cheney obviously died yesterday, and he was the main architect, or one of them, of the war in Iraq.
Yeah.
And you mentioned in your lead that only the good die young. I'd love to hear your opinion on Dick Cheney's legacy. And are we living in a country with more Dick Cheneys than we know in power and government? What's your take on that?
Yeah, well, as I pointed out in the article, I said Cheney proved that proverb true. Only the good die young, because he died old and he was not good. It was my way to use a little bit of sarcastic humor without launching a full-scale attack on the man. And what's interesting is I had an indirect tie-in to him. One of my closest friends, who unfortunately is now deceased, he'd be roughly Cheney's age, a fellow named Bruce Bradley. Bruce got his start in politics as being the horse handler for the vice presidential candidate Miller, who was running with Barry Goldwater back in '64. And Bruce got the job by lying about his age. They wanted you to be like 24, 25. And he said, "Oh yeah, that's me." And he was like 2 years younger, but, very smart, able person that even at that young age. I didn't put this in the article, but he said his principal job was to line up oral sex opportunities for Miller in various cities as they went around.
Wow.
Yeah, I apologize to Stephanie Miller. That's her father, but that's what Bruce told me, and I don't think he was exaggerating. Bruce then became the chief of staff to Robert Ellsworth, who was a Kansas congressman, but he got involved later, became like the head of NATO. And Ellsworth was the mentor of a new freshman congressman by the name of Donald Rumsfeld. And turned out that Bruce and Rumsfeld played squash or racquetball once a week at least. So they developed a relationship. They became close. And then Bruce, after that, while he was pulled out of Ellsworth's staff to work on the Rockefeller for President campaign starting in '67. And he was one of his jobs was to supervise Henry Kissinger. Kissinger was the foreign policy advisor to Rockefeller. And then when Rockefeller dropped out, Kissinger moved over to Nixon. And Bruce told me that he said when Nixon won, Henry called him up and said, "Bruce, I want you to come work for me as my deputy. And Bruce said, Henry, look, he says, as a subordinate, you're great. You kiss ass like nobody else. He said, but as a boss, you'd be a son of a bitch. You'd be impossible to work for. So no. And so then Bruce moved on and set up what was called Bradley Woods. It was one of the first sort of political consulting firms in D.C. And 1970, end of 72, start of 73, gets a phone call from one Donald Rumsfeld. Rumsfeld says, hey, Bruce, listen, I need a favor. I got this young guy, needs a job. I'd offered him a job with me at NATO, but he wants to stay in D.C. His name is Dick Cheney. So Bruce hires Dick Cheney in 1973. As he said, Cheney's specialty was smoking 2 packs of cigarettes a day and 3 martini lunches. And then, no wonder the guy had a heart attack at a young age.
What's interesting, Larry? You always look at these people and you assume that they take everything so seriously, that their whole life was just built up for that moment. But when you hear these stories sometimes, it's like, no, they're very, very much, they're human in every sense of the word.
Yeah, very much so. Very much so. And, Bruce said that after every 3 martini lunch, Dick would be in his office, feet up on the table, leaning back in the chair, taking a nap. So, getting accustomed to the fast pace of Washington life. Then in 1975, Don Rumsfeld, who had started off as chief of staff to newly installed President Gerald Ford, because Nixon had resigned, and Don calls up Dick and says, hey, got a job for you. So Dick went in to tell Bruce, hey, I'm going to become chief of staff to the president, so I'm leaving Bradley Woods temporarily. And that's what he did. He worked for Ford for about 18 months. Ford lost the election in 1976 to Jimmy Carter. And then Cheney went back to Bradley Woods, hung out plotting his next move. They decided he would become congressman from Wyoming. Wyoming only has 1 member of Congress. And then he parlayed that into a position within the Reagan administration. And, the rest is history. He then becomes a corporate shareholder down in KKR, was it? Or
Halliburton?
Halliburton, that was it. Thank you. He becomes a multimillionaire. And what did he do? I mean, he had the right friends and was in the right place at the right time. But he is the quintessential example of what's been going on in D.C. And then on top of it, he was one who didn't hesitate to send other people's sons and daughters into battle, have them killed. No sweat off his nose. He never served. He was too busy, smoking 2 packs a day and sucking down martinis during the Vietnam War. So, it's always amazing, these war hawks who don't put any sacrifice of themselves into it, but have no problem sending other people's sons and daughters into harm's way.
Yeah, I'm thinking of Lindsey Graham right now when you mentioned that.
Yeah, Miss Lindsey.
I'd like to hear your take on Mamdani being elected the New York City mayor. Now look, it's a local election, so whether or not it has national implications, we don't know. Trump said he wasn't on the ballot, but what do you think, Larry? Why do you think a candidate, a Democratic socialist like Mamdani wins in New York, and also Democrats won in New Jersey and Virginia? Is this a repudiation of the Trump administration, or why do you think we're seeing this? And is Trump in danger at the midterms?
Trump is potentially in danger at the midterms if he doesn't turn it around. And the split that's developed in the Republican Party between the Zionists and those who don't want to be beholden to the Zionists. And we saw it on full display going into this election with the likes of this despicable, corpulent congressman from Florida, Randy Fine, never met a donut he didn't like. And then Ben Shapiro and others attacking Tucker Carlson as a wicked racist. Now, particularly because he's an anti-Semite. He's vile. He's like Adolf Hitler, promoting Hitler Youth. I challenge anybody to just go listen to his hour-and-a-half conversation with Nick Fuentes, and you come away with that where Tucker was doing the exact opposite. He was condemning Nick Fuentes, but not calling him a son of a bitch and threatening his life, but doing it in a polite, adult way. to just say, look, it's wrong to demonize any group of people based upon some sort of ethnic marker or genetic marker. You got to judge people by themselves, by their individual character. But yet, this has created a real split in the Republicans. Number one, I don't think it's going to be healed, and there is a growing number of anti-Zionists within that Republican movement. Now, with respect to Mamdani, again, the term socialist is thrown about quite a bit. I'm not sure what that means anymore. Is he calling for the elimination of private property? Not that I'm aware of. Is he calling for redistribution of income from the wealthy to the poor? Yeah, but we're already doing that in some measure with the current federal government. Does that make us socialists? Some would argue, yeah, that does. Personally, I'd be better off. Let's just have a value-added tax applied across the board. Those who buy more, who spend more, pay more. And since the ones with more money tend to spend more and pay more, they would actually balance out and make a fairer tax system than what we have now, where they can figure out all these loopholes and escape hatches so that it runs up being sort of the middle class that pays the heaviest tax burden. With respect to Mamdani's attitudes towards Israel, well, I think a majority of New Yorkers actually will support that. And that goes against the Zionist control in America. AIPAC's not going to be happy. And we'll see if he follows through on his rhetoric about defunding police or going soft on crime. If he does that, if New York turns into a real hellscape like it was in the 70s, prior to Rudy Giuliani taking over, then you could be looking at some real significant problems in New York City. So, but again, when you offer up the likes of Mario Cuomo as your answer, everybody looked at him and said, "Man, we've been there, done that. We got that T-shirt."
Yeah, Andrew Cuomo.
That's right.
Yeah, but absolutely, and especially with his background with COVID, and he left the office in disgrace in New York. It was amazing. I'm stunned. A city like New York doesn't have better candidates for mayor. Like such a successful financial city, we need people like Andrew Cuomo.
Yeah, but see, you're laboring under the assumption that these people who are elected as mayors are the ones actually in control, calling the shots.
That's a good point. That's reasonable.
I would maintain that there is a powerful group of oligarchs. Capitalists.
Yeah.
That are billionaires and people like Bill Ackman and others that actually play a much heavier role in directing what can and cannot be done in that city. And we're seeing the same thing in Ukraine. Again, it's not Zelensky, it's the oligarchs.
Because I saw Soros's son post a picture with Mamdani celebrating the win, and I'm like, wow, look, even Mamdani's with Soros's kid. It's incredible.
They don't try to hide it at all.
It's like amazing.
Yeah.
Before I let you go, Larry, I wanted to hear your take on Netanyahu's next move. So Israel continues to bomb southern Lebanon. The Iran issue's not over.
Right.
What do you think Netanyahu? In fact, Netanyahu had a meeting earlier this week to talk about the risk from Hezbollah. What do you think Netanyahu's plans are? Because we have Gaza right now, that it's almost like turning into Lebanon 2.0, where Israel has a ceasefire in place, but they get to bomb at will and attack Gaza at will, which is acceptable. What do you see Netanyahu's next steps? What do you think he's thinking of right now?
Well, his long-term objective is the extermination of the Palestinian people. I think he's actually doesn't know what to do now, because let's think about this. Let me put it in perspective. Do you realize that Gaza is roughly the size of Portland, Oregon? The square area, if you do it in terms of square miles, Gaza is the size of Portland, Oregon. Israel has now spent more than 2 years, 2 years and 1 month to be precise, with 300,000 mobilized reservists trying to capture Portland, Oregon. They failed. I mean, they could bomb the hell out of it. They controlled the approach from the ocean. They had soldiers on the ground. They blew up almost every house in Portland, Oregon. And Hamas is still there, still fighting. Think about that. So, number one, it explodes the myth of the invincibility of the Israeli Defense Force. They are anything but invincible. They are quite defeatable. That's number one. Number two, Channel 14 in Israel came out within the last 8 days with a report based on talking to senior military and intelligence officials who acknowledged that the damage Iran did to them during that 12-day war was off the charts. In fact, by day 4, these military chiefs and intelligence chiefs were pressing Netanyahu, we got to get away, we got to end this. We got to figure a way out of it. We're taking some damage that we're not going to recover from easily, which is why by day 12, the United States intervened to help save Israel's from potential destruction. So going forward now, Netanyahu has fewer options with respect to Iran. Back in June 12th, the day before the suicide attacks, the decapitation, Iran was facing the possibility of having to go back to sanctions, other UN sanctions, and they were rejecting military assistance from both China and Russia. Now, since June 24th, Iran is accepting all the military assistance they can get from China and Russia. Iran has dramatically upgraded its air defense systems with the S-400 throughout Iran.
That's from Russia, right?
That's from
S-400.
Yeah, previously the S-400 was just at one nuclear site in southern Iran, near the Persian Gulf. But that was because the Russians had a construction crew there and were working. So they brought in the S-400 just to protect themselves. West never attacked it because they didn't want to get into a shooting match with the Russians. The Chinese have deployed systems, weapons, etc. And then on top of it, Russia and China have denounced the snapback sanctions as illegal and that they're not going to follow them at all. Well, all of a sudden, the door is open economically for Iran. Iran has now got some breathing space, both economically and militarily, that it didn't have before. So if Iran is attacked again by Israel, I don't think you'll see Iran stop the war until Israel is no longer intact as a state.
Would Trump get involved? And do you think this election from last night will change his approach to how he goes about business in the Middle East? Like, do you think Trump is now afraid to be overcommitted to Israel and even to go to war with Iran, with American forces?
Well, I don't think the election had, Mamdani's election had as much to do with that as what happened at that Republicans for Jews convention earlier this week, in which people like Tucker Carlson, Candace Owens, Steve Bannon were routinely and roundly denounced by these Zionist nuts. So the bloom is off the rose. Zionism no longer reigns supreme within the Republican Party in all parts. There is still a strong contingent there, and that's what's splitting the Republicans. It will break up the Republicans. So Trump, right off the bat, is starting with a weaker position. But then you get back, what's he going to do militarily to Iran after he obliterated? I mean, he eliminated it, right? So that has to come out and say, well, maybe I didn't know what the term obliterate meant. Yeah. I looked it up in the wrong dictionary because we got to go back in. That's not going to sit well because it's going to further undermine his credibility. Not like he hasn't been doing a whole lot to undermine that credibility up to this point, but it's going to do further damage to him. And if he decides that attacking Mamdani, makes him look better, I think it'll make Mamdani more popular. Mamdani will come off as, someone being bullied by Donald Trump.
My last question, Larry. Venezuela is another. Obviously, it's another place where Trump doesn't seem to have a consistent message. He told 60 Minutes over the weekend that he doesn't see Maduro lasting, but he doesn't know if he's going to go to war with Venezuela. So what do you, I mean, but then again, Trump, like he said with Iran, he said that he would give them 2 weeks before the attack to throw them off. So you really don't know if you're Venezuela, if this is some kind of subterfuge. What's your take on the risks of U.S. going to war with Venezuela? Do you think that that risk is a little bit less than it was a month ago?
Venezuela is Spanish for Vietnam. Okay.
Wow.
And it's bigger, far bigger than Vietnam, landmass wise. It's a third larger than Texas. Think how big Texas is, except it has jungle, triple canopy jungle, rainforest, mountains. I spent some time in Venezuela in the course of doing money laundering investigations and other things. And God help us if we decide to put any Marines or even special operations forces in. I mean, this Hollywood nonsense about the prowess of Delta Force and SEAL Team 6. Now, listen, they're very capable special operations units designed to do specific types of missions. Getting engaged in full-scale battles with conventional armies is not one of them. I recall I'm acquainted with Rick Woolard. He was a very famous Navy SEAL who now you can find him on YouTube. He plays the bagpipes. He learned how to play bagpipes, plays bagpipes at the funerals of Navy SEALs. But Rick, when he was in Vietnam, made the mistake of throwing a hand grenade into a Vietnamese hut and then putting his back against the wall, not realizing it was bamboo. So he got peppered up the back of his legs, his ass, his back. So, he got those scars. So he was in Grenada. He led the team in Grenada back in '83 to rescue the governor of Grenada. And they got pinned down by some Cubans with a 50 caliber machine gun, a heavy machine gun. And so even though you had all these, these great Navy SEALs who could, swim forever and do push-ups till the average man would drop, they were hunkered down. They couldn't do anything until the U.S. Marine Corps came roaring up the road in tanks and armored personnel, armored fighting vehicles to save them. And, I worked for a retired Marine colonel at the time, and he took great delight in telling that story. But the point is, to go, it's one thing to run a capture kill mission, but that's not going to bring down the government of Maduro. And so the United States has got real limited military options, or if we decide to invade, we're going to, if we're going to really put troops on the ground, all of a sudden you're going to be getting Americans killed in a way that they weren't killed in Iraq, because the jungle provides far more ambush points than hiding out in the desert in Iraq or Afghanistan, for that matter.
Well, Larry Johnson, thank you for joining the Trends Journal. I always appreciate you giving your insight.
Hey, Ed, listen, always welcome the invite. Thank you.
Thank you.